The temple courtyard lay in silence as dawn light crept over the tiled roofs. Ethan walked with restless steps, his chest tight, feeling the weight of unspoken fears. Master Li stood at the far edge, robes flowing like still water. Ethan said, "Why does everything feel hollow when I try to follow the path?" The teacher's gaze was steady, unshaken by the tremor in the young monk's voice. In the shadows, Daniel leaned against a wooden post, smirking faintly as though he saw only weakness in Ethan's struggle. Sophia watched quietly from a corner, her calm presence reflecting another possibility. Then, breaking the silence, Master Li said, "Ethan has already lost his way." The words cut like a blade through the courtyard, startling Ethan into disbelief. His heart raced as the world tilted, and the ancient ground beneath his feet seemed to betray him. He whispered, "Lost? Already?" The morning wind stirred the trees, carrying his doubts into the open. A shock so sharp that it shattered his sense of certainty. Ethan's breath quickened as he tried to grasp the meaning of Master Lia's words. The weight of failure pressed down on him, twisting into fear. He whispered, "Lost already? How can that be?" Daniel gave a dry laugh, shaking his head as though the truth had always been obvious. Sophia shifted slightly, her calm eyes softening, silently offering Ethan a sense of compassion he could not yet accept. The courtyard's silence grew heavier, as though the temple itself mourned his despair. Ethan felt the ground sway beneath his feet, the air too sharp to breathe. Master Li remained unmoving, his gaze unwavering, carrying no comfort, no judgment. The young monk's heart pounded, and his mind screamed for clarity, but his master's stillness only deepened the storm within him. He felt as though he was standing on the edge of a cliff, unsure if he would fall or learn to fly. The wind carried Daniel's mocking tone across the courtyard. Daniel said, "Did you think enlightenment was a prize you could simply reach for?" His words sliced through Ethan's fragile state, pushing him deeper into turmoil. Ethan clenched his fists, trembling with frustration, while Sophia quietly looked on, her steady presence offering no answers, only reflection. Master Li spoke softly, "The path reveals itself only when you no longer chase it." Ethan's lips quivered as anger and fear clashed within him. The silence between the words was heavier than the words themselves. He longed for assurance, but none came. Every breath tasted of doubt, every sound echoed like a question that had no answer. In that moment, Ethan felt both exposed and unseen, as if his very soul was under trial. Ethan turned toward Master Li with desperate eyes, his voice shaking as he said, "Tell me what I must do to return, to not be lost." The teacher did not answer immediately, his silence stretched like a mirror reflecting Ethan's chaos. Sophia finally whispered, "Sometimes being lost is where the path begins." Ethan's breath caught, stunned by her words. Daniel scoffed loudly, dismissing her as naive. But Master Li's still eyes flickered, almost imperceptibly, toward Sophia, as though acknowledging a truth Ethan was not ready to hear. The silence pressed harder on Ethan's chest, forcing him to confront the ache of not knowing. His body trembled, his heart battling against the truth he feared to accept. The courtyard grew darker as clouds passed across the rising sun, shadows stretching like whispers of doubt. Ethan's face drained of color, his mind spinning with fear. Master Li's voice finally broke the silence, calm and firm, "You must face what you fear most." The words echoed, filling every corner of Ethan's being. Daniel muttered, "Or break under it." Sophia lowered her gaze, her calm slipping into quiet sorrow for Ethan's struggle. The weight of the moment pressed on all of them, as if the air itself had become too heavy to move. Ethan whispered, "Fear." The word left his lips like a stone falling into still water. In that instant, he felt both utterly shattered and strangely alive, standing at the threshold of something he could not yet name. The temple bell faded as Ethan felt the echo inside his ribs, like a hollow drum. He wanted to run, yet his feet sank into the old stones. Master Li said, "Let the ache speak before you answer it." The words landed like rain on hot clay, hissing and vanishing. Daniel said, "Pain is proof you chose wrong. and his smile sharpened the air. Sophia stepped closer without a sound, her stillness soft as a lantern. Ethan said, "If I stop striving, I will disappear." The fear in him rose like smoke that would not clear. Master Li said, "Only what is false can vanish in silence." Ethan stared at his hands and did not know whose they were anymore. The bell's last tremor told him nothing, and somehow asked everything. Ethan knelt in the meditation hall and counted his breath until numbers broke. Incense curled like questions he could not read. Master Li said, "Sit as a mountain and let the storm waste itself." The cushion felt like a stone that would not warm. Daniel said, "You measure stillness the way a merchant weighs coins." The insult stung because it sounded true. Sophia said, "Let the breath find you," and the hall brightened by a shade. Ethan said, "I fear the quiet will swallow what remains of me." The fear thrummed through the tatami like a hidden drum. He closed his eyes and saw only the dark outline of his name drifting away. Afternoon, rain began, gentle at first, then certain. Ethan stood beneath the eaves and watched the drops stitch the garden into one fabric. Master Li said, "Do not resist the needle." Ethan said, "If I unravel, what remains to wear?" Daniel laughed and let the rain touch his face like proof. Sophia said, "Let what is not you loosen." The rain answered for them all with patient rhythm. Ethan felt the old story of himself soften at the edges. He wanted to gather it, but his hands were already full of water. Master Li said, "You are not the cloth, you are the space it holds." The garden blurred until only sound remained. At dusk the koan room held its quiet like a sealed jar. Ethan said, "What is my face before fear learned my name?" The question shook as it left him. Master Li said, "The mirror does not keep the dust." Daniel said, "You chase riddles because answers would break you." Ethan felt the barb and let it stick. Sophia's eyes met his and did not flinch. She said, "Let the breaking show the light." The paper walls breathed in the settling dark. Ethan pressed his palms together and felt a pulse he could not claim. Somewhere a nightbird called and left no trace. Night wrapped the temple in a hush that felt like open sky. Ethan walked the corridor and carried his fear like a lamp without oil. Master Li stepped beside him and said, "Walk until the lamp is not needed." Ethan said, "I do not know the road without its light." Daniel said, "Then stumble and call it wisdom." The cruelty rang clean and cold. Sophia said, "Every step can teach if you allow it." Ethan slowed and felt the plank speak under his feet. The dark was not empty, it was wide and listening. He whispered, "I am here," and for a breath the corridor answered. Morning broke clear and cold as Ethan faced the meditation hall like a gate he could not cross. Master Li said, "Sit until the watcher tires of watching." The command felt simple and impossible at once. Daniel said, "You are collecting postures, not truth," and the words struck like gravel. Sophia moved a mat beside him and said, "Let breath arrive on its own." He nodded and lowered himself, yet the stillness clawed at his edges. Time thickened, and thoughts hammered like distant carpenters. Ethan said, "I cannot stop the noise." Master Li said, "Stop trying, then listen." The room seemed to lean in. His knees ached as doubt found new rooms inside him. He closed his eyes and met a crowd of mirrors that showed only his reaching hand. By noon, Master Li assigned walking meditation around the stone path. Ethan stepped heel to toe and felt the earth shift beneath the story of his pace. Daniel said, "Measure your progress by laps. It is all you know." The taunt pushed heat into Ethan's chest. Sophia said, "Let the foot place itself." Wind slid across the pines and carried a scent of resin that tasted like memory. Ethan said, "Every step is a verdict." Master Li said, "Then walk without judge or jury." He tried, and the stones answered with small, honest sounds. His breath found a rhythm that did not belong to him. Fear rose, then thinned, like fog surrendering to light, and the path grew wider than its circle. In the workyard, a cracked bowl waited on the bench like a dare. Master Li said, "Repair without hiding the break." Ethan lifted the pieces and felt his hands betray a tremor. Daniel said, "You want a flawless surface like always." The charge burned. Sophia said, "Let the seam tell the truth." He set the lacquer in gold, and the fracture drew a thin river across the clay. Ethan said, "If the line shows, I will only see failure." Master Li said, "Then see through it." The bowl steadied as breath returned to his ribs. A sunbeam found the gold, and set it briefly aflame. In that flare he sensed both ruin and refuge breathing together. At twilight the bell test returned like a storm he remembered too well. Master Li said, "Strike once and hear beyond sound." Ethan lifted the mallet and felt his pulse in the wood. Daniel said, "You swing for approval, not truth." The remark landed hard and clean. Sophia said, "Let the echo end itself." He struck, and the bell opened a long road of metal light. Ethan said, "I only hear my wanting." Master Li said, "Listen past the listener." The ring thinned to a thread that stitched dusk to night. Silence settled, and with it a grief he could not name. He stood in that ache and did not run. Night gathered over the rock garden, and the rake felt heavier than wood. Master Li said, "Draw what the wind would draw if it had hands." Ethan pulled lines that broke as they formed. Daniel said, "Your patterns are cages wearing halos." The insult echoed over the gravel. Sophia said, "Let the rake enter and leave without leaving you." He slowed, and the lines began to breathe between the stones. Ethan said, "I fear the design will reveal nothing." Master Li said, "Let nothing reveal you." The stars arrived like patient witnesses. He raked one last arc and saw, not a picture, but a field large enough to hold his doubt. Dawn poured into the library hall, gilding the scrolls like silent witnesses. Ethan traced the ink of a koan and felt it burn his skin. Master Li said, "This truth has been beside you, yet unseen." Ethan whispered, "What have I missed?" Daniel laughed. "Everything." His cynicism cracked like brittle wood in the quiet. Sophia said, "Perhaps nothing is missing, only covered." Ethan's pulse hammered as if truth hid in his veins. He said, "If it is here, why can't I feel it?" Master Li closed his eyes and said, "Because you clutch the veil tighter than the cloth." The words pierced deeper than any riddle. Ethan felt the weight of every expectation fall heavy, yet in that heaviness was a thread he had never noticed before. Ethan walked the corridor, his chest thundering as though the walls pressed in. Master Li said, "Every door here is open, yet you walk as if they are closed." Ethan touched a sliding panel and felt his own resistance tighten. Daniel said, "Doors are useless if you don't know where to go." Sophia whispered, "The step matters more than the hall." Ethan trembled. "If I walk through, I will lose the self I know." Master Li said, "That is the only self that can be lost." A silence fell like a blade, severing his illusions. Ethan's throat closed as tears rose uninvited. For the first time, the walls seemed less like prison, more like mirrors waiting for him to see. In the meditation hall's stillness, Ethan felt his breath collapse into jagged fragments. Master Li said, "You wrestle with chains that are not there." Ethan said, "Then why do they cut so deep?" Daniel muttered, "Because you believe the pain makes you real." Sophia's voice softened. "The pain is only passing rain." Ethan said, "But it drenches me." Master Li's eyes flickered and he said, "You are not the rain, you are the sky that holds it." The words struck like lightning, burning away the fog. Ethan gasped, and for a moment the silence inside him widened into something vast and unbroken. Evening light spilled into the courtyard, a stage of long shadows. Master Li said, "The suffering was never about the task, but your clutching of perfection." Ethan staggered as if struck. Daniel said, "I told you, you've been chasing air." Sophia's gaze caught Ethan's, calm as still water. Ethan whispered, It was never the meditation, never the silence, it was me. The revelation cracked open a chamber of grief he had carried unseen. His voice broke. I chained myself. Master Li nodded once, as though a gate had finally opened. The courtyard seemed brighter, though the sun had not moved. Ethan felt both broken and freer than he had ever been. Night covered the garden with a silver calm as Ethan knelt before the pond. His reflection rippled like an echo of someone he no longer knew. Master Li said, "You were never broken. You held the mask of perfection too tight." Ethan whispered, "The mask was my only face." Daniel stood silent, his cynicism muted for once. Sophia said, "A mask can be set down without losing yourself." Ethan's tears fell into the pond, merging with the ripples. For the first time, the face in the water looked lighter. The silence did not choke him, it opened him. In that stillness, he felt the unseen truth. Freedom had always waited in his open palm. The storm broke over the mountains as thunder rolled into the temple grounds. Ethan knelt in the courtyard, rain soaking his robes, heart racing against the roar. Master Li said, "The moment of surrender comes when nothing is left to hold." Ethan shouted, "If I let go, I will vanish." Daniel's laughter cut through the storm, sharp and bitter. Sophia's voice steadied, "Only the false vanishes." Lightning split the sky, casting Ethan's face in raw terror. His fists struck the ground, mud rising between his fingers. Master Li stepped closer, eyes unyielding, and said, "Collapse and see what remains." Ethan's body trembled, his pride cracking like the tiles beneath him. His voice broke as he cried, "I cannot carry this anymore." The storm deepened, every drop a drum on Ethan's breaking body. He fell forward, forehead pressed into soaked earth. He said, "I surrender, I cannot win this battle." Daniel sneered, "You always wanted pity, not truth." Yet even his scorn faltered in the rain. Sophia whispered, "Surrender is not weakness but opening." Master Li's voice thundered calmly, "In death of the ego, life is revealed." Ethan sobbed as the storm swallowed him whole. His arms gave way, and he lay face down trembling, yet a strange warmth bloomed in his chest. He whispered, "Then let me be nothing." In that collapse, the storm no longer fought him, it became him. Lightning struck close, the crack splitting the night, yet Ethan did not flinch. His chest opened with every breath, no longer fighting the storm. Master Li said, "In emptiness, the truth arrives." Ethan lifted his face, water streaming, eyes wide but no longer wild. He whispered, "I feel stillness." Daniel turned his head sharply, his mocking words stolen by awe. Sophia smiled faintly, her tears indistinguishable from rain. Master Li's voice softened, "This is the moment before awakening." Ethan closed his eyes. The rain no longer heavy, but light, no longer cold but cleansing. The storm raged, yet inside him a silence stretched infinite, untouched. The storm eased, rain softening into a steady rhythm. Ethan breathed as if for the first time, chest rising with peace rather than fear. He whispered, "The truth was never outside me." Master Li nodded slowly, his silence heavier than words. Daniel looked away, jaw clenched, his cynicism shaken. Sophia whispered, "You have entered the space beyond struggle." Ethan touched the mud at his knees, feeling no shame, only release. He said, "I was never broken, only blind." The courtyard shimmered with rainlight, as if the temple itself had waited for this surrender. A stillness stretched across the night, binding them all in its quiet. The storm passed, leaving the temple bathed in moonlight. Ethan stood slowly, body trembling yet spirit lighter than air. He said, "I release what bound me." Master Li's eyes gleamed as he answered, "Now you see." Daniel's face was pale, his silence louder than mockery. Sophia said, "This night will stay with you forever." Ethan raised his head, the sky vast above him, stars breaking through the clouds. He whispered, "I am not lost, I am here." The words lingered, not as defiance but as truth. The night air wrapped him gently, the temple, alive in its quiet, bearing witness to his awakening. Morning returned with a hush that felt newly made as Ethan walked beneath the pines. The rain had rinsed the world, and the stones shone like simple answers. Master Li said, "Let peace be ordinary." The words did not strike, they settled like dew on grass. Daniel trailed behind and said, "So this is the prize, a quiet I cannot measure." His tone wavered, and the scoff did not land. Sophia said, "When grasping rests, seeing begins." Ethan touched the rough trunk and felt its patient years in his palm. He said, "Nothing is missing. I was louder than the day. A bird cut the air and left no debt." Master Li smiled and said, "Walk on." The path did not promise, it simply accepted each foot. In the refectory, steam rose from bowls like small blessings, and silence held the table kindly. Ethan said, "I used to eat to fill the ache, today I taste the grain." Master Li nodded, his eyes bright without display. Daniel said, "If meaning is this plain, why did I chase edges?" The question felt honest, and it softened the space between them. Sophia said, "Edges cut when we lean on them." Chopsticks clicked like rain on wood, and no one hurried the bite. Ethan breathed through his hunger and found it gentle. He said, "Enough is real." Master Li said, "Enough is vast." The room seemed larger than its walls, as if the meal were a door. By afternoon, the garden called them back to simple work, and rakes lifted lines from gravel like breath from chest. Ethan said, "I will draw and not own the shape." The rake slid without argument, leaving arcs that welcomed sky. Daniel said, "If I stop designing, will anything remain of me?" His voice carried less iron and more weather. Sophia said, "Let the wind finish what you start." Master Li watched and said, "Practice is the art of returning." Ethan felt time loosen its fist until only motion stayed. He said, "The pattern dissolves, and I do not disappear." The truth fit like a robe that knew his shoulders. The garden listened, and did not need to answer. At dusk, the koan room held a candle, and a silence that did not demand. Ethan said, "When I stop proving I can hear." Master Li said, "Hearing is the work that has no worker." Daniel leaned near the paper wall and did not speak. Sophia said, "Let the answer arrive without footsteps." Ethan felt the old habit reach for a perfect line and then release. He said, "I can fail and still be whole." The candle guttered, then steadied, and shadows practiced mercy. Master Li said, "Carry this not as a banner but as breath." The day folded itself without creases. Ethan bowed and did not ask the dark to explain. Night opened wide above the bell tower, and the stars arranged themselves without effort. Ethan said, "Peace does not erase the world, it lets it be bright." Master Li said, "Keep close to ordinary light." Daniel said, "I may not believe as you do, but I want what is not cruel." The line sounded like a door he would someday try. Sophia said, "Kindness travels farther than proof." Ethan touched the timber and felt the day settle in his bones. "Wow," he said, "I will rise tomorrow and sweep, and that will be enough." The tower breathed with him, slow and clear. Master Li smiled once, and the night did not need more. Dawn returned, pale and gentle, stretching light across the temple grounds. Ethan walked slowly, no longer hurried by questions, his steps aligned with the earth beneath him. Master Li said, "The journey never ends, but peace walks beside you now." Ethan breathed deeply, his chest no longer a cage but an open sky. Daniel followed at a distance, his silence heavy, his eyes uncertain but less sharp. Sophia said, "Every morning is enough to begin again." Ethan touched the temple wall and felt its cool stone pulse with life. He whispered, "I am not chasing. I am here." The words carried like prayer into the morning air, vanishing yet leaving a trace. In the meditation hall, Ethan sat cross-legged, the silence no longer hostile but sheltering. He said, "I do not search for perfection, I rest in what is." Master Li's nod was a gesture of completion without ending. Daniel lingered near the doorway, his eyes shadowed, his lips pressed thin as though words wrestled inside him. Sophia said, "The silence is wide enough for all of us." The incense lifted, twisting into ribbons that seemed to bow to unseen winds. Ethan smiled faintly, his shoulders lowered in ease. He whispered, "Here even the noise is stillness." A bird's call pierced the quiet, but instead of breaking it, it folded perfectly inside. At the garden pond, Ethan knelt and saw his reflection ripple beneath the surface, no longer fractured. He said, "The shadow is part of me, yet it does not bind me." Master Li's voice was soft. "When you embrace the whole, the parts no longer quarrel." Daniel stood in silence, his face pale, eyes tracing the ripples with something like yearning. Sophia said, "The water teaches without speaking." Ethan touched the surface, watching circles expand outward, then dissolve. He whispered, "I am not broken glass, but flowing river." The pond reflected sky and self as one, and for the first time, Ethan accepted both. At twilight, Ethan carried a broom across the courtyard and began sweeping fallen leaves. His movements were unhurried, his body aligned with rhythm rather than purpose. Master Li watched with a faint smile, his eyes approving yet detached. Daniel leaned against the post, his expression quiet, the mockery gone. Sophia said, "In sweeping, the path is revealed again." Ethan said, "Every step, every stroke is enough." The air grew cool, leaves rustling as if bowing in chorus. The courtyard glowed with amber light, shadows soft and welcoming. Ethan's heart no longer raced, it pulsed steady as the broom brushed earth clean. Night closed gently over the temple, stars rising clear and unhurried. Ethan stood at the highest terrace, gazing at the horizon where earth kissed sky. He whispered, "I am not lost, I am here." The words left him like breath returning home. Master Li stood at his side, silent, eyes reflecting the constellations. Daniel lingered behind, his doubt softened into quiet wonder. Sophia joined them, her presence calm as the night air. The silence carried more weight than any teaching, a truth woven into the stars themselves. Ethan inhaled and felt the world inside him, vast and open. The journey was not over, yet he no longer needed it to be.